So we have a bit more to go until we get The Last of Us Part 2. Of course, I'm very excited for this game. I've been playing the remaster and I had a ton of fun in it, but of course we also got a ton of details regarding Part 2 in the past few weeks that you're probably gonna want to know, especially if you're a new player, but even more so if you're an old-time player like me that already went through the first part several times. So in this video I'm going to cover all of the crucial details that you should know before heading in, as well as everything you need to know before playing The Last of Us Part 2. So let's jump right into it, and as always, a thumbs up on this video would be super awesome. By the way, if you want to win a free copy of The Last of Us Part 2, then definitely go ahead and check out our June giveaway. It's for any 2020 release on any platform, and yes, the winner can choose both the game as well as the platform he's going to be playing it on, but there's also a second giveaway that we're doing in partnership with Instant Gaming, so a huge shout out to them for making this possible, and you can go ahead and choose the game from their website, and the winners are going to be announced both here on this channel as well as via the email addresses provided. Again, all of the links are in the description box down below as well as the pinned comment. Anyway, I definitely recommend playing through the first game if you haven't already. It kinda explains a little bit of what happens, since the second one follows right after that. So the story in The Last of Us Part 2 starts during wintertime in Jackson County, about 5 years after Ellie and Joel have returned to Tommy's settlement at the end of the previous game. During that time there's a period of relative peace, but soon after we start the game and the story, that peace is disrupted by a very tragic event that kind of forces Ellie on her path of hatred and revenge, and as a result she also leaves the settlement behind and heads over to the city of Seattle, where most of the game will actually take place in. And by the way, if you've been keeping up with the controversy, and even more so if you saw any of the leaks actually don't depict the ending at all, and according to a very recent interview with Neil Druckmann, the creative director over at Naughty Dog, there's many false things out there. We don't want to go and correct anything because in a way that would be spoiling the game. By saying what it isn't, we are kinda saying what it is, according to this interview right here. In any case, expect the story to be even more focused on creating suspenseful moments compared to the first one, while still leaving room for sections of relative peace and tranquility as you explore through the much bigger environments of The Last of Us Part 2. More of that later, but of course the gameplay mechanics have been greatly expanded upon compared to the first one, and there's also some new mechanics that we didn't have before. So Ellie, for example, is much better at navigating the environment and combat, has access to way more tools and abilities than ever before to aid her both in combat and outside of it, but to compensate for all of that, her enemies have also become much more complex and the AI is way more intelligent this time around. The biggest changes in this regard are of course to the stealth as well as the melee combat, and even more so with the introduction of that dodge mechanic that I'm going to talk about in just a little bit, but the stealth is going to continue to play a major role in the game, even though you still have the option to go with a more heads-on approach, as that was also obvious in the first game. New systems that make stealth better are the fact that you can now crawl with Ellie, so you have a prone function that you can use in order to crawl under vehicles or to take advantage of dense vegetation. This of course allows for a much wider approach and also way more diverse approach when it comes to enemy takedowns. She can also squeeze through gaps in the walls or in the furniture. If there's any of these, she can use these both as means to escape as well as to better position herself when she's taking enemies by surprise during combat. Also, let's not forget about the fact that there's a lot more verticality this time around. Like for example, Ellie is much better at jumping over ledges. You can climb much higher than before, either to get a tactical advantage against the enemies or to discover a new area or to reach a place that might reward you something useful, or you can go in and even swim this time around, which is something that Ellie was unable to do in the first game. This is also likely going to mean that those puzzle section with the wooden pallets are not going to make a return in the game, though I don't think much people out there miss them. Listen mode is also back as always. It's going to be the main means you're going to detect enemies and other bigger creatures nearby, including the infected, but there are a few twists here and there that actually will keep you on the edge. The most important is the fact that you can now leave a trail behind, and thanks to a new type of enemy, which are the guard dogs that the WLF have, they are going to be able to track you down, so you have to constantly use this to actually see where your trail leads so that you can move into a different location or provide some distractions. And this is basically what's going to make positioning and providing distractions even more important in The Last of Us Part 2 compared to before. It's the fact that that you will want to constantly switch things up when stalking your opponents if you don't want to be detected. This also brings us to that melee combat, which is going to be even more important now that we have the dodge mechanic that's going to save you from a lot of situations, from a lot of damage, and even more so from when you're getting surrounded by enemies. So if you time this correctly, if you know your enemy attacks, if you know how to dodge properly, you're going to save yourselves from situations that in the previous game were almost impossible to escape from. Of course, there's other mechanics in there that make combat feel even more spicy than in the previous game, like the fact that you're very agile with Ellie means you can quickly grab throwables when running past them, like bricks and bottles, but you can immediately follow up with a throw straight into the enemy that will stun them momentarily, so you can follow up with a quick stab. Speaking of quick stabs, Ellie has access to a permanent switchblade, so no, you don't have to craft your shanks like how it was in the previous game, where they would constantly break upon using them either against enemies or opening secret doors. So I'm really excited that these two features exist in the game, because this makes things so much more convenient, especially for those stealth takedowns. But there's more to that as well, like for example the bow and the arrow has been confirmed to be at least slightly redesigned. Of course, we saw the new reticle, which should make aiming with the bow and arrow even easier than before, as well as landing those shots. But there's also additions to the arrow physics, so when you get shot by an enemy with the arrows, Ellie is going to react to that, the arrow is going to get stuck in her body, and this is going to also have a gameplay impact. One of these impacts is the fact that your aim is going to be affected. Ellie is also going to bleed over time, so you're going to want to pull that arrow from your body if you want to avoid being even further more damaged, but it also affects your listening mode, and it sometimes can even fully disable it if you don't pull out the arrow. So definitely sounds really awesome just by the fact that the combat seems so detailed. Naturally, this brings us to the section of enemies, and as I've said previously, the enemies this time around are going to be much more intelligent, much better organized, and also quite more distinct from one another. Of course, we do have the humans and the infected, but even between these there's a lot of differences. Like on the human side, the WLF, which control most of the city of Seattle and also call themselves the Wolves, they are way more organized, they are a military group that uses high military grade equipment, and they will oftentimes even use those guard dogs to flank you out and flush you out of your hidden locations. And this also comes in contrast with the Scars or the Seraphites, which kinda act in a more stealthy manner, kinda like, well, Ellie in this case, as in they also use like melee weapons, they also use those to ambush you, but they also have access to bow and arrows to shoot you and take you down. And they're also way more quiet, since they don't communicate verbally but rather through those whistles, which kinda seem a bit unsettling when you hear them. And also let's not forget about the infected. The runners, stalkers, clickers and the bloaters make a return from the first The Last of Us, but this time around they are way more aggressive. So for example, stalkers from the previous game are now capable of completely evading your listening mode, and oftentimes you will find yourself being ambushed from behind or from behind some corner that you weren't even expecting to even feature a stalker. But also the clickers have become much better at echolocating you, so this is going to probably be a pain in the butt to say the least. And this doesn't even begin to cover the fact that there's at least 2 new stages of infected, with one of them being the Shamblers, kinda like a more advanced bloater that kinda charges you in, and once it gets close to Ellie, emanates these toxic gases that can deal a lot more damage. So yeah, very interesting things when it comes to enemy and enemy AI. Of course, as I've said, the enemy AI is way more sophisticated, and some of the details will actually even shock you, because this is something that is happening on a PlayStation 4. So enemies can vocally indicate your latest known whereabouts, where they last seen you, and they also have like general awareness, not just about your surroundings but also where you're heading in. So for example, if an enemy spots you jumping over a fence, they will indicate that a girl just jumped over a fence, or if you're heading into the grass, they will actively say that to the others and they will start scouting and flanking you. Even in terms of scouting, it's very realistic, the way they kind of go behind covers and try to approach you by surprise. They also take a glance under vehicles to see if you're there, even if they haven't seen you going there. If they were previously alerted, they will try to search as many locations as possible, just like how it would be in real life. Which brings me to that level of immersion that Naughty Dog is actually trying to achieve with this game. Every enemy in the game is going to have a name apparently. So for example, when you kill somebody and their friend is right next to them, they will actually scream their name in shock and disbelief, and when they find their body, for example, once you kill them, they will also mention their name and talk about it. And if you manage to listen on an enemy conversation, oftentimes they will include events that you might have been previously a part in, like for example taking down a location, or for example just killing somebody's friend or dog or companion. This also brings us to that crafting and exploration gameplay, and especially exploration is going to be an even bigger focus this time around. For example, that parking lot that we saw one of the early gameplay footage to happen in is actually a part of a much larger forest. It's a massive open area and it gives you the possibility to sneak in that parking lot from pretty much any angle. It's filled with potential routes and options you can take on. You can even completely bypass many of these encounters if that's what you want to, or take down only the essential number of enemies if you don't want to be bothered with them. But if you're like me, chances are that you're going to go in and pretty much clear everything and kill everything in sight. But this also extends to the means of transportation. So with vast areas, you will now want to use horseback riding in order to go over them and traverse them more hastily. But there's also entire sections that are flooded and you can only use boats in order to traverse through them. The reason you're going to want to explore all of these areas, just like in the previous game, is because this is going to provide you a wide range of scavenger parts, a lot of upgrades, as well as a ton of those skill manuals that you will definitely need if you want to be better adaptable at combat. There are at least 4 skill trees in the game currently that we know of, including survival, this is for increasing your HP, crafting, that lets you build more items and better equipment like health kits and whatnot. There's the stealth branch that provides faster stealth kills, movement speed when prone, as well as crafting silencers and improving their durability. Precision is the one that we saw in the most recent gameplay reveal that improves weapon accuracy and aim, as well as listening mode range. But there's also a 5th skill tree that hasn't yet been shown as it wasn't unlocked in the gameplay reveal. Nonetheless, new skills are unlocked through these skills manuals that you find scattered in the wild, and upgrading skills is done through the usage of supplements, just like how it was in the previous one. But again, to find these, you're going to want to go out there and explore. The weapon bench is also back, but way more detailed, both in animations as well as upgrades. So if you scavenge for these parts, you will have them available for these weapons. You can go in at a workbench and upgrade various parts of them, like improving the accuracy, the damage, the clip size, and also like we saw in this case, this was visualized with a scope on the weapon that you were able to use. So very detailed, a very awesome game. It just looks like a visual marvel, something very close to the levels that we saw in Red Dead Redemption 2, at the very least in terms of the weapon customization and upgrades. But anyway, these are most of the big details that you should know about The Last of Us Part 2. Of course, let me know down below if you're still interested in this game. I'm definitely going to cover it here on this channel, so I hope you guys are going to be on board with it. But yeah, this is it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and peace.